All right. Hey,
Let me move
nice
this
to
out.
meet
But
you.
yeah, you too. I appreciate you asking me on. This is a lot of fun. I'm a fan of the show. So,
Oh, thank you. I was going to ask you, there's a very famous jazz guitarist that has your same name. Do you ever get confused with him?
I did growing up. Everybody knew
Okay.
who he was. I don't, not anymore. I think he's probably moved on by now, I would think, or passed on.
I I don't think so. He's up there,
Is
and
he
I
still alive?
interviewed him about 4 or 5 years ago, and he had a really tight relationship with Miles Davis, and he gave me some iconic stories. He was such a great guy.
He was an amazing guitarist in the 70s, right? Or
Yeah.
when electric guitars were fairly new. Yeah, I had a poster in my bedroom, John McLaughlin,
Okay. Yeah.
electric guitars, because people always said that. Oh, wow,
Yeah.
John McLaughlin. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, he was a part of that electronic jazz phase, and it was on a label called CGI, and he really pushed that whole idea further. But, the Brits were always really on top of being innovators anyway.
Oh,
So,
very, yeah, especially in that arena. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so he was right in there. Well, man, John, you got a wonderful story. I'm looking forward to delving in. Where are you coming out of?
Charlotte, North Carolina,
Charlotte,
Queen
North Carolina.
City. Yeah.
Okay. I always hear how green it is in North Carolina.
Well, I tell you, they're taking the trees down pretty fast, but it's got a very nice canopy of big old trees. It's an old city. I mean, it's got history going back to, obviously before the 1700s, Revolutionary War stuff.
Yeah.
I grew up here when it was a small town,
Yeah.
and it's become, a metropolis now. So I hardly recognize it. But yeah, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
It's just a little crowded, more crowded than it used to be.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
Well, man, it's great to meet you. And I'm going to begin our conversation with what we lived through for the last 3.5 years. How did you get
Okay.
through the pandemic and how did it change you?
I tell you, the pandemic was something I really was not prepared for, like everybody else. I still went to work every day, but being that we were quarantined on the weekends and everything, I got all the home improvement projects done
That's
that I
right.
could possibly think of. And this is kind of funny. When I first met my wife, we were watching an old Monty Python movie, and at the very end, when they're doing the credits, they've got two people in a horse suit pedaling a tandem bicycle up a hill. And we thought it was the funniest thing we ever seen. And then years later, we're at the beach. We rent a tandem. We realized we like riding a tandem. We buy a tandem, and I said, "Well, now we got to get the horse suit, right? We have to
Yeah.
get the horse suit. I figure out how to ride it, ride the bike with the horse suit, and we do the parades here, St. Patrick's Day parade. We have a lot of fun. Kids love it. This big goofy horse on a bike. So when the pandemic hit, I said, "Now, for years we've been saying we got to write a story on how the horse gets on the bike.
Yeah.
This is it. This is our chance." So we wrote a children's book, a
Yeah.
picture book, and self-published it. We had a lot of fun with it, which was a good experience, and it led me to learning how to self-publish a book and help me with my next one. But I think what changed in me is, and maybe I've just gotten older. My next birthday, I'm going to be 60. I've kind of become less tolerant of how we become inconsiderate with each other as a community.
Yeah.
I think it started with toilet paper hoarding, excuse me, people wearing masks, distancing themselves. Now I don't know if it's like this in Kansas City, but a lot more aggressive driving
Yeah.
than there used to be before the pandemic. The roads cleared out, so everybody felt like they could drive. But a lot of really inconsiderate behavior.
Yeah.
If you go to the store, people are parking in the fire lanes now. And I think we've lost that sense of community that we had back when we were getting together in groups. I don't know how you get it back, but it's either I've become less tolerant of it or we've changed to that degree. I'm not sure.
I think you're right. And I think that's the weird thing about it is that it was kind of like post 9/11. You thought there was going to be this humanity sea change. Things were going to be more, uh, there was going to be a softer edge to things. But I think the opposites happened. There's a harder edge that we never had before. And I
I
think
totally
it's
agree.
just going to continue and continue. It's just kind of human nature. Everybody wants to get back to what they were doing before. They want to run, do whatever they're going to do. And it just kind of fades away.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's changed us, and I don't know that we'll ever be the same as we were.
Yeah.
Uh, but like you say, September 11th changed too. I mean, it's all about change. It's just sometimes you don't see it coming. Well, rarely do you see it coming, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you got an eclectic mix of things going on. You're a prison teacher, you're an author, you're an entrepreneur, but I want to boil this down to something that we can all digest. So I'm going to put you in front of a third grade classroom. It's career day. One of the kids looks up and says, "What do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
If I had to sum it up into one word, I would say that I'm a builder. above all, I took a company with my father and with a lot of help that we started with nothing on the kitchen table, and over a course of time built it the way I wanted to build it to a company that did build somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million last year. And that was my big build. I mean, I really enjoyed that. When I got the opportunity to teach in a prison, now it took me 7 years to get in there. They weren't going to hire a 50-year-old guy with no teaching experience, but I kept at it, kept at it, kept at it, and finally got the opportunity. And when I right took the job, and I said, okay, what do you guys have for me to work with? This is a 99-hour class. We meet, for 11 weeks, 9 hours a week. You just whatever you want to do is fine. So I had nothing. I had to build it from square one, and I loved it because I could build it the way I wanted to. And after 11 weeks, everybody who wanted to in that program and did their work walked out of there with their own business plan, a 15-page business plan that they could actually start a business with. And then the book, I got to create a book. So I like to take nothing and build it into something. That's what makes me happy, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing to go into an environment like that because what was your philosophy on wanting to do that?
I wanted to teach. And the one thing I've learned over these years is if you want something, you just keep at it. You don't
Yeah,
quit, because if the day you quit's the day you don't get to do it. And I had it in my head that I was going to do it. So I kept applying for jobs, applying for jobs. And the last place, honestly, that I wanted to teach was in a prison. But 7 years in, my only offer, I'm going to take it.
yeah,
And I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? I mean, these guys are scary looking. I'm in this dingy little day room with, I don't have internet. I don't have anything. And
yeah,
I got to somehow teach these guys. Half of them don't look like they want to learn anything.
yeah,
But what I learned in that was that these guys were a lot like me. A lot of them had made one mistake or even had one bad night and got themselves into this system that does nothing to help them. And I'm the
yeah,
only resource they've got. I mean, they dehumanize them. And if you're going to run an orderly prison, you have to dehumanize. I mean, you can't play favorites. The whole thing falls apart. So I get it. But at the same time, there's nobody in there that's taken an interest in them or saying, hey, you could do this, or you could not have to come back here if you don't want to. They weren't hearing that from anybody. So I felt very responsible for giving them the tools that they needed to not return to prison. That was really the whole goal of the class, was let's find a way. And starting your own business is a great way because now you've got a felony on your record.
yeah.
So that's going to hold you back from your next job. But you can start a car washing business, or you can pressure wash, or you can landscape, do some service businesses. And we're not going to ask about your past. That's not important.
Yeah,
So, and I know there were some guys I've kept up with that got out that are doing very well. Whether
that's
or not I
good.
had a part in that, it was well worth doing. The problem was, here I'm trying to build these guys up. The system's trying to beat them down. So we're at odds the whole way. And it was just a matter of time before they showed me the door, and they did after about 3 years. So I don't do it anymore, but I'm still with an organization that teaches, and we can do it on the outside now. So it's better than, the limitations I faced in there.
Yeah, I think that whole idea of second chance and redemption is huge. I think it just adds to our empathy and what you were saying about a world that we've moved from. I think even with us being as divided as we are, it's like like you said, we're all more alike than we aren't,
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. Yeah.
you know. And that's the thing I think that was so cool about Johnny Cash going into the prisons, hardcore prisons, you
Right.
know, and
Right.
getting in there and really connecting and he may have really, turned a lot of people around by doing that. I mean, this big star comes in, they're heckling and doing their thing, and he just went with it. So I
Yeah.
think it's very commendable.
I enjoyed it, and really, like I said, I didn't set out to do it, but I ended up there, and I think it was for a reason, because I'm the kind of person that I can look at myself, and I remembered, and when I see a guy 23 years old and he's got a 7-year prison sentence for drug dealing or whatever he was doing, and I think I was hanging with the people that did the same thing when I was young, and
Yeah,
I just didn't get caught. Or I came from a white middle class family. He came from a black lower class family. When I got in trouble, the cops took me home to my parents and said, "You deal with this kid."
yeah,
When he got in trouble, they took him to juvenile hall, and he
yeah,
started his career as an inmate. And it's a tough cycle to get out of, especially if you're not getting any help.
yeah, for
So,
sure. So when you were in the third grade, what did you want to be when you grew up?
it's funny. The business that I built, I learned from my father, and he started on the factory floor of a company that made metal lockers, among other storage products. Worked his way up to national sales manager. So when he would come home, he would always tell us the stories about the great sale this guy made who worked for him. And so I wanted to be a locker salesman and work for my dad, which they all thought was crazy because he's working for a big company, and they were shaking their heads, but it's exactly what happened. years later, it just so happened that as he's starting the company, I'm getting out of college, and he says, "Why don't you come work for me? We don't have anything. We're working out of the dining room, but I can teach you a lot." And so I have self-fulfilling prophecy. And what I learned was funny. I told him, I said, "Well, this looks really risky. I'll give you 2 years, but I'm leaving after that because I got to find something safer."
Yeah.
Well, he lost his job for no reason. They just got rid of him. He was too expensive. He'd been there 25 years. They got a young guy to do his job, and he swore he'd never work for anybody else. So what I learned through that process was the risk in life is putting your fate in somebody else's hand.
Yeah.
It doesn't look safe to do your own thing, but it is the safest move you can make, because you're putting all your cards on the table. You can make the decisions. You can pivot when you need to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So who's been a hero for you in your life?
I've had many. I was influenced greatly by a grandmother who went through the Great Depression. She taught me frugality. I mean, we used to laugh at her when she'd get a clothesline for Christmas, but that's what she wanted, and that's all she wanted.
Yeah.
She saved her aluminum foil and made her own clothes and grew her own food. I mean, she was very resourceful, and I took a lot out of that. My mother taught me not to quit, which has been maybe the cornerstone of my whole life. Was when things got tough, I just didn't quit because it was put into my head. And then, of course, my father taught me business, but also taught me how to lead a quality life and be a good person. And so those really, it's all family, but those were the three people that took an interest in me growing up and influenced me very positively.
So if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now, someone that's inspirational to you, who would you love to meet and talk to?
Wow, so many. One guy that I really admire is Warren Buffett,
Yeah.
because he practices what he preaches. And I use his material a lot in my classes because the principles of sound financial management are pretty simple to understand, but they're very difficult to live. And he's a guy that lived it, not just taught it, but lived it. So if I could sit down and talk to him, I think that would be my choice.
So obviously with someone like Warren, they have a high level of discipline and inspiration and drive. What is that for you? What gets you out of bed? What gets you to accomplish everything you want to get done and be who you are?
I tell you, it's being that I was raised by very frugal people. I mean, you can trace my family back to, they're all farmers, 2 or 3 generations back, and they would place the value on somebody was simply how hard you could work, how hard you could physically work was what was important to them. So that was instilled in me, and I still want to get up and accomplish and work every day. And I retired a few years ago from my company, but I came back because I realized that I could still bring value and more in an advisory role. But it's important to have somebody there, and I could also be a role model and settle disputes and that kind of thing when they come up. So I think as long as I can bring value to any situation, I'll continue to do it.
So let me ask you this. As an author, what was the first book that you ever read growing up that really made you want to either read more or write?
My parents used to keep the old classic 50s books on the shelf, so that's what I had to pick from. And
Yeah.
one that I remember was The Cane Mutiny.
Yeah.
And I read it. It was a great book because it is really about empathy or lack of empathy. At the end of the book, you get a whole different twist on the story that you didn't see coming. It was powerful. But that one I remember well because it made me, you know, very aware that words, when used correctly, can tell a great story, and you
Yeah.
can learn from them.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure. So in your life as being a professional and a businessman, what's been your best success story? One that always puts a smile on your face.
um, you get to the point where it's not so much about the money; it's about watching people that you have under your wing grow and develop. And that is my greatest reward. And sometimes that means they've got to leave your company and go somewhere else. We're losing a guy this week that's been really good. He's been there 3 years, but he got a better offer. And so it's like, hey, best of luck to you. No, we're not. We're glad you're moving on to something better. So it becomes more about the people and the relationships than
Yeah.
about the other accomplishments. They don't mean as much. And I got that out of the prison experience too. It was the people there that I could see needed a little bit of help. I could give them a little bit of help. And that's really where the value is to me. It's in helping people improve their lives.
What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Um, the the when I was, I guess, about 15, I was in the Boy Scouts, and I got a lot more interested in girls and driving cars than hanging out with the Boy Scouts. But I was real close to becoming an Eagle Scout. but I didn't want to do it anymore. I went back and I told my mom, I said, look, I'm out, I'm quitting. This is done. And she said, you can't quit. You're so close. Why don't you just finish? And I said, I hate it. I'm not interested anymore. I've been doing it long enough. She wouldn't let me quit. And she said, I hate quitters. You're going to finish this. And I did it. I got the award and I gave her the badge. And I said, I did this for you, not for me. It didn't mean anything to me. I did it because you made me do it. And what I realized was a lot of people were impressed that I did it. I got a lot of accolades for it. From people said, wow, you're an Eagles guy. That's impressive. And well, not really. I did it because I had to. But the fact that I accomplished that and that she wouldn't let me quit at 15 got me through the hard times when the company was really struggling. And there was 2 or 3 times when I wanted to sell it and be done with it because I could see no future. But I didn't. I stuck it out, and that's the difference between the people who I think are successful and not. Or they just refuse to quit. So that's probably the best advice I ever got, and it was done in a not just a word way, but kind of show way, where
Yeah.
you're going to see the result of this if you don't quit. But you got to trust me on this.
Yeah.
So
I had a good friend of mine in college. I was 4 years in, I was going to take a semester off. And he basically, there was some people that were like, yeah, go ahead, do it. But he was a pretty raw guy. And he said, what's the matter with you? Or don't be a moron. Just finish it. Just do it. Get it out of the way. And I think about that. And that was such a big moment because, there's a lot of people that just put it on hold and never come back, So,
oh yeah, I mean, most people. I took a year off, and everybody thought I wasn't going back, but I knew I was. But
yeah.
yeah, once you take that year off and you start making some money,
Yeah.
it's different.
That's it. That's it. And if you're right on the doorstep, you might as well just knock it out and move on.
Absolutely. Don't, because going back's tough.
Yeah.
It's a change of lifestyle, and yeah, you don't want to be doing that.
So
It's very
speaking,
easy not to.
yeah, it is. It's really easy. So
Yeah.
speaking of that 16-year-old younger version of you, let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into that young version of you, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained in your life, the things that you've succeeded at and overcome. What advice would you dispense on your younger self?
I didn't have the confidence at that age that I needed. It took me a long time to build that up. Um, and it was through a lot of learning experiences. So believe in yourself. You know, the failure rate of small businesses, for instance, is extremely high. 50% don't make it through the first year. But I always told my guys, don't bet on the odds, bet on yourself. You can make this happen. You just have to want it really bad and put all your energy into it, and you can make it happen. I wish I could tell that person to be more confident in what you do, because it's the difference, between making things happen and not believing that you can.
Yeah, for sure. So everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, I'm somebody. I try to put myself in the other person's shoes before I act on how I handle a situation. So somebody with can see the other side of somebody else's situation. It's helped me, in a lot of areas in life. That's how I see myself, as not a judgmental person, but somebody who kind of takes every person as an individual and every situation as unique, and try not to pass judgment, try not to be biased or prejudiced or anything like that. Walk into every situation and really try to understand where everybody's coming from. Um, that's how I see myself. Maybe that's not how they see, but that's how I see myself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, John, if anyone wants to get your books, they want to learn more about you, reach out to you, anything about your world, how can they do that?
Oh, thank you. Name of the book is Lifeline to a Soul. I've got a website, lifelinetoasoul.com. If anybody wants to go on there, there's a place you can leave an email address. I'll get in touch with you. And if you mention famous interviews or mention Joe, I'll be happy to send you an autographed book at no charge. It'd be my pleasure.
Excellent, John. This is wonderful. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time. It's been wonderful.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir.